Hello everybody and welcome. I'm under very strict instructions to speak for no more than 4 minutes, absolutely maximum. And it's 5:38, so I think my slot is already gone. So I'm going to have to keep this as tight as I possibly can. And of course you're not really here to hear from me anyway, so that's another reason why I need to get on with it. I am really happy to be here. I haven't been directly involved in this project, but I've had a keen interest in the Horn of Africa for some 20 years or so, and I've followed Sarah Mariam's work and that of Penha throughout that time. In fact, I might say that it was Zeri's fault in the first place for giving me the opportunity to spend some weeks in Somaliland a couple of decades ago, a visit that set the scene for much of my work since. So thanks, Zeri, and I'm going to blame him for that. So that's a connection actually with this project, and it's a reason that I'm particularly interested to hear about this topic. The Horn of Africa, of course, as you know, is a region as or more diverse and rich in so many ways as any in the world. We hear much about the challenges confronting those who live in that region, and those challenges are only too real. But it's important also that we remember the wealth of human, cultural, and natural resources. For it's surely there that we must look to secure the livelihoods and well-being of the tens of millions of people who live there. In my case, a great deal of my focus has continued to be on the Somali areas of the Horn, particularly on Somaliland, where pastoralism has for generations been the dominant livelihood strategy, and is now increasingly threatened by climate change. Successive droughts over several seasons brought many throughout the Somali Horn to the brink of famine, and now cataclysmic floods across large areas of that region have added to the crisis. A crisis that's complex, with political fragmentation and conflict, both a cause and a consequence of the fragility of livelihoods. Those are some of the challenges that I mentioned. It's appropriate this discussion happens at a time when COP28 is taking place in Dubai, and many of these issues are under active discussion. In the context of significant impacts and the urgency of the need for measures to tackle them at a global level, it is also hugely important that we think deeply and carefully about how we might help to address the specific localized challenges faced by so many, not just, of course, in the Somali areas, but throughout the Horn. I said at the start that my focus has largely been on the Somali Horn, but I've had the good fortune over the years also to have been part of collaborations in Ethiopia and Uganda in particular, where social, environmental, and cultural contexts differ, yet many of the challenges and opportunities parallel those found elsewhere. Those who will be speaking in the coming hour or so, of course, have far more extensive experience than I do, and in particular I know much less than I would like to about the ways in which those in the Afar region of Ethiopia are faring. I'm therefore really looking forward, as much as any of you here, or anyone online, to learn more about the opportunities and challenges presented by an inclusive, productive safety net program in the Afar region, and indeed about the potential more broadly for effective support for social protection, as customary systems experience increasing stresses from cumulative crises, but equally have much to contribute if we're to address those crises. That's it from me. I'd like to welcome you all now again, and hand over to Dr. Lusaget Abebi, Penha Trustee and Chair, who will be chairing this event. But finally, just to say once again, on behalf of DPU and of UCL, a warm welcome to you all. Thank you for coming or joining us online. And over to you, Dr. Abebi. Thank you very much. And I'm going to relocate myself to the audience so I can see the slides, because I don't know what's coming, and I need to know too. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mike, for welcoming us here. And I'd like to really thank the Development Planning Unit for hosting this book launch. So it has really been a joint endeavor with Penha. Well, I would like also to welcome you on behalf of Penha to this book launch. Well, as this is going to be a hybrid event, so there are some people who are watching us online, and therefore it is going to be recorded at the same time too. Well, before we proceed further, I would like to remember two of our colleagues from PNR. One is the late Nicole Kenton, who was the managing director, editor, and co-author of two of the chapters in the book, and member of the board of trustees of PNR, and longtime friend of PNR, and who departed from us on 21st of January 2023. And I would like also remember our late brother, Kes Maxey, a longtime friend, dedicated volunteer and committed fundraiser of PNR, who departed from us on 19th October 2022. Well, we are going to miss them, but we have to proceed. Just a few words about the event and what I've gathered from this extensive and extraordinary work of the scholars. Three of them, Barakat is there. Barakat, can you come and join us here, please? Who are going to briefly share their findings. And Professor John Weaver-Lee, I think he's online, and he's going to give us a summary of the book. So, as you know, pastoralism in the whole as a lifestyle was and is perceived to be primitive. Policymakers and development agencies, in collaboration with the elite Highlanders, have attempted to change their culture, way of life, in some cases forced them to become Highlanders or agriculturalists. Lately, climate change, poor or non-existence of veterinary services, and shrinking grazing space due to the expansion of agricultural sector was a source of threat and triggered a conflict between farmers and pastoralists. In a couple of old countries, government policies don't as such provide space to address the special needs of pastoralists. Thus, PNR for the last 30 plus years took the lead in research, creating awareness and advocacy work in the Horn of Africa. The book, which is going to be launched towards an inclusive social protection, pastoralism, and resilience in Ethiopia, lessons learned from sub-Saharan Africa, is the recent contribution of PNR to pastoralism in the Horn of Africa and also beyond. With funds from the Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research, the Social Protection for Inclusive Development for AFAR project brought together several renowned multidisciplinary academics and researchers from Ethiopia and the UK. Focusing on the Ethiopian productive safety net programs, after extensive field research in the Afar regions of Ethiopia, the researchers have identified and shed some lights on various indigenous coping mechanisms among pastoralists used during man-made natural calamities and also in managing conflicts. Just a couple of highlights from the book. Just I will quote one. I quote, among the Afars, a customary system referred to us as the MEDA plays a significant role in promoting mutual assistance in times of drought and conflict through the enactment of a set of rules called ADA, customary law. For example, these laws enable the Afars, like many other pastoral groups in Ethiopia, to support vulnerable households through the provision of lactating cows and restocking livestock. End of quote. Well, the PSNP transfer is provided to household on a monthly basis for 6 consecutive months from January to June. And I quote, the PSNP resources are transferred in kind. The PSNP resources are transferred in kind. Well, I would like to stress that. To pastoralists in the form of food items, which the communities prefer to cash, as this reduces their exposure to the risk of inflation and unfavorable currency fluctuations. This is an excellent example, an excellent coping mechanism to manage inflation which should be replicated in different parts of different communities in Ethiopia as a greater whole. The book, even if encourages indigenous mechanisms, it also pinpoints that this institution, some of these indigenous institutions are male-dominated with limited space for women and youth, I quote. But while traditional institutions enjoy a high degree of legitimacy, they tend to exclude women. The degree to which women are able to participate in local decision-making institutions, end of quote. Thus, the book is an excellent source that provide facts to develop pastoralism advocacy. With this brief, I will introduce the three researchers and authors who are with us here today and will share their findings. Each of them will have 15 minutes. When they reach the 10 minutes mark, they will share a card, and and then we will proceed from there. And as I said earlier on, the professor will join us online, and he would give us his presentation. And at the end of the presentation, we have a 30-minute question and answer session. Well, on my left, I have Zara Mariam Free, who is the principal investigator, associate professor teaching, development planning unit, and the founder of PENA.
Recording in progress.
On my right, we have Barakat Tsagay, senior researcher and policy analyst at PENA, and a research associate at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. On my far right, we have Angela Roberts, an independent consultant and researcher and affiliate at the Department of Education, University of Oxford. And online, we have Professor Weaver Lee, Professor of Comparative Agriculture and Rural Extension at the University of Reading and at the Royal Agricultural University, and immediate past chairman of Tropical Agricultural Association International and chairs Farming Community Network in Devon, England. My role as a chair is going to keep time so that they would not pass the limit that has been given. So with that, I would kindly request Zari to do his presentation. Thank you, Zari.
Thank you very much. Well, I think you guys, yourself and Michael, really said so much. What I was going to say is fantastic. It makes my life easy. You know, the reflection on the horn. The book itself, I think Professor Sagat had done good job. He evaluated already. He made quite very interesting remarks within. So what I'll try to do is, you can go back to these are the partners I try to put in the front. You know, there's DP, of course, Makerere University, Penha, and at the Grant University. Those are the main partners who took. And this is very important to acknowledge that in the beginning, you know. And I think I just want to mention a couple of strategic things. One is the reason why we chose those institutions, because Ethiopia has very old institutions. At Saba University, probably 70 years. No?
No.
We went for what we call emerging institutions. Samara University, for example, is in the heart of the Afar land. So we felt that a study like this, by directly engaging with those researchers at the level of the community, will be a great contribution. The same goes for at the Grant University. We had a number of researchers from there. That also reflects a bit of the Highland perspective. And I really, this is one very important thing. Then we bring in UCL and Penha with the regional and international experience. That was really the logic behind this association. It's a very serious relationship. It wasn't just like for a show, you know. It's meant. And then even the inspiration for the book came from the Afar study. We criticized the government policy, what had been delivered. Was it actually relevant to the pastoral community? In a way, the Afar study inspired us to work on this book and then widen the group of researchers. So from 7, we end up being like 15. We become a big family, and that's really very important. They involve people about Sawa University, Makerere University, and also people like Angela. So I just want to give you this background. It's quite important context, you know. And now if I go back to the region, basically some organizations to thank. Addis Ababa University, at the Graz University, Samara University, UCL of course here, and others. This is quite important. I just want to stress that. And finally, as far as the presentation today goes, although you said it already, some of you, thankfully, I want to say something about the region. I'm a regionalist. I believe all these countries of ours have so much in common. So although we keep boxing one another one way or the other, thanks to our politicians, maybe I shouldn't say this. Anyway, I might be arrested for saying it. But I think it's important that we think of a region as a cohesive region which has so much civilization for it. I think this is sometimes we forget that when you look at all these issues, conflicts and that. The other thing I want to stress is, having given a bit of the background about the region quickly, where is it, what do we want, and then I will talk about pastoralism as a way of life. Because the problem in our region, and Lord Sagad is a highlander, I'm a lowlander, so basically the highland farming systems, they are actually so ancient, they have 2,000 years technology. There isn't even some reasoning when the pastoralists are looked down upon. There is no logic to it, because it's a way of life, it's a different way. It's also quite productive. I'm going to show you some images that, because I do a lot of propaganda for the pastoralists. Why not? I should do that. So in a way, I think I want to be honest with you. This division between the communities is more of a livelihood system and ecologically determined, rather than the highland or the urban people being better than the pastoralists. But that's a fact. I will say a bit more about the pastoralism. What is it exactly? What happens? Because that will give us a context. Now we concentrate on the Afar case, because that's really the basis. And thanks to both of you have said something about the Afar situation, which is quite important. So, and lastly, I will also talk about how this book has come out. And I think the last comment from Lord Sagad was a great contribution to the discussion, because you really summed up some of the important points. So this will be the menu, and I speed up. The guy is sitting by me, which is speeding up. Okay, go to the population of the Horn. The Horn in general. I want to give you, for the sake of those who are not very familiar with the region, I just want to give you a bit of a feel, what is it, where is it exactly. And the region is 230 million in 8 countries, and I'm going to say what these countries are. 40 million are estimated to be pastoral people. Welcome. 40 million of them are pastoralists, and ecologically very diverse, because the ecological diversity also means livelihood diversity, That's what we're trying to say, and that's very important to understand. The region also has the region's cultures and different civilizations over centuries. This is also important. Now, it is unfortunately located in a very strategic part of the world, and lack of peace affects all communities, pastoralists or otherwise. So right now there's a lot of tension around the Red Sea basin, as you know. I mean, it's quite frightening, with the Middle East situation going on. So we are in that kind of very conflict-proneness, conflicts of all sorts, high military expenditure. Our region is one of the regions where so much money is spent on buying arms, Brain drain is an issue, and we are good examples of it, for example. And then unplanned urbanization is there, happening in big time, both for the pastoralists and as well as the other communities. And this is very important context, So I just will move on quickly. And then I want to show you, these are the people of the Horn, I like this picture. It represents the diversity of the region, All sorts of, you can see, this is interesting. That's what I'm talking about, the diversity of the region. And many of these groups actually cross borders, especially when you work in the nomadic areas. You'll be amazed how dual citizenship is normal the day of life. You cross, your cousins are on the other side of the world. That makes a lot of sense, This is one thing which is very impressive in our region. So this will give you some idea about ethnicity. Okay, move forward. And then I will talk about the ecological setting of the region. Very interesting. You can see the highland is the green bit, all the way from Kenya, all the way up the Ethiopian Eritrean highlands and up to the Sudan. And this determines the livelihood system. Small farming, most of it. Mixed farming, small farming kind of systems. The yellow ones, a lot of Somalia, Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Eastern Ethiopia, part of Eritrea. These are also the predominant, Sudan, of course, these are predominantly pastoral areas. And I say this for a reason, because if this is a way of life which is crossing borders, then it makes sense to have a common understanding of what's going on in these countries, okay? And that's really the geography. And I think what I can do is I can share these slides, by the way, some other time, so you can enjoy them I just want to run through them very quickly, okay? So this is the ecological setting. Now we move to the other one, the political setting, of course. These are the many countries we have, and I made sure that South Sudan is included as a country, so you can see it, and how close to the Central African. This is the different countries we have in the Horn of Africa. This is a political map of the Horn, you know? Okay, move on. Cool. Yeah. Now, on the question of understanding pastoralism, I think what I want to say here is that, you know, this is a very important economy, social, cultural heritage in many of our countries, which is often forgotten, you know, because the planners are mostly from urban and sedentary backgrounds so far, although now the nomadic communities have been progressing a lot in many ways, you know. And I go to places like Somaliland and other parts where I can see there's been a shift, you know, kind of the urban-rural linkages are very strong. People have a foot in the village and in the towns. You know, this is a transition which is happening big time in our region, which is often, it also lacks uniformity. There isn't really something called pure pastoral nomad. It doesn't exist. It's a fantasy, you know. You either have mix of animals, you know, goat, sheep, or whatever. The economy is quite mixed because in that way you become more versatile. It cuts also across ethnicities. Pastoralism has no one ethnic group. There are multiple of ethnicities who use, it depends, it's determined by the ecological setting of these regions, as I said. Regardless of the ethnicity, it's irrelevant in that sense, you know. Highland-lowland interactions are also very common. And if I was a student now with my PhD, in fact, I would love to look at that topic, you know, it's so important. There are very strong links between highland communities and lowland communities. Exchange of goods and services, exchange of culture. Very often I'm shocked in many of our universities. I always tease people by saying, why can't you do a study like that? It would be fantastic, you know. It will bring people closer, the more understanding, and when you develop a policy, you can have some solid ground to do it, you know. So this is also something which rural-urban linkages and economic diversification is significant, is happening. I would love to some of our DPU students to take this up as well, you know, as a topic, not only necessarily in the region, but elsewhere, you know. This is very strong link we don't think about in terms of the economic interaction. Multi-species herding, you know, you have so many different animals, as I said, and I quote myself here because I say this huge resource for scientific development in a way. Significant contribution to the economy. In fact, livestock in our region is one of the greatest economies. You know, we tend to export livestock, especially from the pastoral areas. There's a self-sufficiency on livestock production. The problem is on food production, in that sense, crops and others. But I think this is one thing which we forget. And it say why? Because many of our governments are not prepared to support this sector, you know. And I'll show you an example. If you move to this is my favorite picture in Berbera. I think I plagiarized it from somewhere. I don't know where I got it from. But it has a message, you know. These are livestock. Berbera, I don't know how many people. Berbera is one of the ports now. It has become a kind of darling because the other ports are a bit dodgy, you know. So Berbera is, especially from my neighborhood, you know. Berbera is a very important exit for livestock. And when you think about this livestock, you think they kind of, they are not, this is commercial farming, you know. This is actually indigenously based science. Animals produce, look at this, and Arabs are buying it, you know, blackhead sheep and calf, you know, sort of camels as well. So this is one big economy, and I think it's really not appreciated, you know. What happens in this system is there are middlemen, mostly, who are the link, you know. Oh my God, okay, I move on. So it's a very important economy, and this is the evidence. Okay. And then the variability of the environment, the unpredictability of it, the capabilities of the private sector, for example. We don't really have a strong private sector in our countries to manage this livestock trade. They don't exist, you know, which is very sad. I mean, all of this is done just through traders, you know, middlemen mostly. And the Arabs are, I would say, to give you an example, raised camels from the Sudan, you buy them locally, a couple of $100, male camels. You go to Dubai, you're talking about $3,000 for a camel racing camels. This is what I'm talking about, real loss in the value addition. And this has to change dramatically, otherwise the poverty won't go away. Governments also have, they don't promote government, they don't promote civil society among the NGO, among the nomads for some reason. There's a sort of, there's an absence of livestock policy at the local and national level. And the livestock profile, in fact, in the PSRP, is actually looked down. They don't involve in that. Now let's go back to the study. Keep moving. Okay. This is the productive safety net. Ethiopia, very briefly, in 2005, and this was one of the largest interventions on social protection in Ethiopia. It started then. The population I've covered, estimated 10 million altogether, includes the highlands as well and the lowlands, and the PSMP, Productive Safety Net Program, started in the highland areas because they are settled, they sound like the people who would benefit from it. Because the fact that the pastoralist people are mobile considers as it's not worth it, it's an attitude of the policy makers, so they wouldn't be. So the second stage started at among the Somali region and the Afar region, and that's why we want to focus on. Is one of the pastoralist communities, in fact the most marginalized communities of all. Now the idea of a consortium was really, as I said, to exchange, although the majority of the researchers were Ethiopians, of course, because there are institutions there we worked with. Myself and Barakat are Eritreans, we are the neighbors. Then I think Angela is very much, Ethiopian in many ways, by co-option.
We all are.
And not me. It's not tribal. Well, how ready we are to fight, Anyway, this is very important that, I kind of mentioned that because there is this group of people, and it was a great mix, The very fact we criticizing these people being urban and they don't know much about pastoral, you engage with them, and that's the best way to move forward in terms of policy. So why the Afar? The Afar have been excluded. Have I got 14 minutes already?
Yes, you have gone.
Oh my God.
Really?
Okay. Now, the Afar are marginalized people, and this is their environment. You're going to push me, I'm going to move more. Yeah. This is their environment. I'm glad I got this. This is the Afar herders, boys going to school, and the Afar herders, the older ones, and they're all aspiring different things. These boys wanted to be pilots or teachers, whereas those guys are happy with their animals, with a machine gun. You see the AK machine gun, you protect your animals, but also do other things with it. Now, very quickly, this study among the Afar is started from 2015 to 2018. We appreciate the work we did over there with people, and fundamentally we were going to evaluate the intervention itself, the PCNP program, how to investigate whether it is appropriate to the Afaris or not, and etc. etc. And then we did PRA and PRA experience for where, remember this is a marginalized male-dominant society, so we had an issue that I was particularly focused on women and youth as well. Now, summing up, give me 1 minute. Summing up the main findings. The PSMP is not, this is almost common sense, by the way. The seasonality of the farmers is very different to those of the pastoralist community. So that was one contradiction. For instance, in the highland areas, January, June is a time where there's a lot of desperation. The highland communities don't have many crops at the time, and that's really when the PCMP was designed, it was tailored to that. Now look at the pastoral part. This is not good for them. They want it to be a bit closer to the seasonality of their mobility, like from June to December. So there's a contradiction. If you put this agenda for them to take, they wouldn't take it. So that's number one. Number two, they also want to tell them, farmers, the actual package of the PCMP had agriculture in it, crops, and this also reflects the mentality of the highland and urban people. Fair enough, But for the pastoralists, what are you doing? Why are you giving us tools for, things like that? So it becomes. Thirdly, the PRA findings indicate that there are multiple factors in the affair which curtail it, you know, and also not appreciating the evolving pastoralist community, the urban linkages, the rural-urban linkages, the generation of youth wanting to go to school instead of being herders, you know, all that, there's a lack of understanding. And we wrote it in the report very clearly. Now, the other thing is, very quickly, I'm done, I'm almost done, you know.
Well, I think I can give you 1 more minute,
Okay,
but not more than that.
Okay, dear me. All right, okay. Fighting. Civil war.
That's fine.
Okay, yeah. Finally, I'm gonna sum up the book. Why were we inspired? You know, we said, okay, we wrote, we made the funders happy for their money, but the rest of the voyage is ours. We took it a challenge of ourselves. We have very little money for it, and we mobilized a number of researchers, and we are very lucky to have people like that who didn't ask us for a lot of money. Because this book here, actually, if you think about it in terms of cost, you know, the commissioning the researchers would have been a lot of money, but we were lucky because we took it as a challenge. That was the inspiration in the first place. So we want to widen the scope of this study. We want to put it in the context of the wider Sub-Saharan situation, and then just document it to add value to the research we did already. And the book also provides very important insight, and this is what I thank Lord Sagat for his talking about the missing links, what has happened, you know. So we really want to kind of inspire the policymakers. The role of women and youth is stressed because that's the reality we found on the ground. And also we are now fighting against the hegemony of the sort of perceiving the lowland areas as some kind of savages, you know. We challenge it. And this is a living statement. The book will be a living statement for those people who say, those backward people, you know. I mean, sometimes the misconception in Wales and Scotland is quite similar. I travel to those places, you know, the animal owners down, you know, by the southern tribe and the English tribe. It happens here as well in many ways. So on that note, I better keep quiet.
Yeah, well, I would appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Larry. To be fair, well, it's a lot of research, and it's a lot of findings, a lot of work. Therefore, it would be very difficult to summarize it within 15 minutes. So I appreciate that you were able to read.
These are also available, where we can
Yeah.
make them available. The notes can be available for people to pursue them.
So with that, well, now I'll ask Barakat to do his presentation. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, better to do it in 10 minutes.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, I should have taken those 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot.
I can give you.
So it is my pleasure really to briefly talk about the book, especially about this huge agenda of social protection, especially focusing on Sub-Saharan Africa. So the first question is why we need social protection at this moment or during this age. Basically, the pastoralists live in a very harsh environment, especially in East Africa. If you go to the Sahara Desert area and Central Africa and southern part of Africa as well. So predominantly they live in a very difficult ecological setting. So they are really exposed to various types of drought and farming experiences. So this element of social protection, particularly the safety net element, comes how we can support them to build their resilience. They are resilient, they have been there for centuries, but they have been struggling nowadays due to a number of factors. So the question is just how we can really boost their resilience through some kind of intervention, which is the safety net intervention. So this agenda of social protection or the welfare system, especially in Africa and others, have been gaining momentum because of the 2007, 2008, 2009 financial crisis, and especially recently because of the COVID-19 also. Every country almost, especially the west or the east or south, everywhere, there was an intervention of safety net support. So this really becoming hot agenda nowadays because of these factors. So from what you look, these two maps, this one is mainly concerning about weather-related droughts and crisis or disasters. The top one is related to the conflict. So if you can see, almost in every part of Africa, there are spots of conflicts or disasters. So what we can do to do with this one? So one of the instruments to use is the safety net intervention to support them during this kind of situation and after these disasters as well. So in some incidences, sometimes politicians introduce safety nets because they want to build their political capital. If you want to have a means to get voters from the communities, you need to bring this kind of supporters. Especially in Uganda, if you go to Uganda and other countries, they try to use this kind of intervention to gain political support. So this could be an agenda for the government. Another one is just because of the influence of the World Bank or other international institutions, the UN. So they try to really encourage to have some kind of programs in their countries. This could be the influence of the global partners as well. Basically, some governments also want to have really the leveling up or increasing the equality of the communities between rural, urban, pastoralism, farmers, all this. So they try to also intervene in this kind of instruments. So it can be for many reasons, that's the bottom line. It can be for many reasons, politically motivated or in terms of development, long-term or short-term objectives. So we're looking at the nature of the safety nets. Some of them are very consolidated ones. They have been there in these countries for a long time, especially in terms of they became part of the government budget, the political process, where they've been discussed in their parliamentary process and approved as part of the budget. It's really not common in Africa, this kind of social protection packages. The emerging social protection is mainly in the Middle East, in Asia, and as well as Latin American countries. They are really more of advanced packages or programs, especially if you go to Brazil, Mexico. These are very prominent countries in terms of social protection. The limited social protection is just an emerging agenda in Africa, especially if you can take Ethiopia, for instance. They have a well-advanced program, relatively speaking. Kenya and Ghana and others, but still they have got many limitations really to prevail as more solid programs. In terms of the agenda, we try to, scholars try to see safeness from two perspectives. Some of them they say is basic human rights thing to deliver food and cash to the communities. Others say no, it's part of our long-term objective, building our human capital stock. So they try to see from different perspectives, but sometimes, for instance, like countries like Mozambique, they put this agenda in their constitution. It is their constitutional right to claim this kind of support. Others try to intervene as they are part of development agendas. So this can be supported through various means, sometimes cash, sometimes food, subsidies, vouchers, insurance, public work to contribute to. In our case, where we studied the Afar communities, like Soga mentioned it, they preferred food than cash. Cash is very important. If you want to give them the Afar's cash, they say no, we don't like cash. Give us the food or the food aid, the food support. This because when there is a fluctuation of inflation, all these things, the cash becomes, it will have less purchasing power. So in this case, they prefer to have food because most of the time the price of the food increases. It doesn't really usually decreases. So this very important preference of these communities we studied. The another one is conditional and unconditional. In terms of conditional, you need to contribute to the program. For instance, you need to send your child to a school, or you need to have your child vaccinated, or you need to do some kind of public work or environmental rehabilitation activities so that you can get this benefit. Unconditional is mainly for lactating women or disabled people maybe, and other beneficiaries. So there is also a clash between traditional and contemporary safety nets. The traditional one is mainly embedded part of the communities, especially in the pastoral communities. When a disaster happens to a family, the others can contribute in terms of livestock and the other supporters through religious institutions and other traditional means. The contemporary ones are the ones we have been talking about, the Ethiopian experience, for instance, the PSMP. So the next one is just we try to see the safety net intervention from local, national, and global development goals. Especially you can look at the family level, at the community level, at national level, at global SDG goals as well. So you can look at the SDG 1, 2. This kind of framing can help you really to link. There is no any kind of interventions that can really live without any kind of impact. So it's really linked. You can look at the local level and so you can look at the local level. Maybe this next slide.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I'll back to that one. So to the local level, so it's linked. So, but a number of factors can really influence at each level. It's like at the micro level as macro levels as well. So will you please go back to the, yes, yeah. So this one is the data I got from the World Bank especially. So the intervention in Sub-Saharan Africa is still the lowest among these programs globally. They have been really progressing well. They have been becoming solidified through time, especially the last 20 years, but still at their really lowest level of intervention compared to their GDPs. But if we can have a look at these figures at a later stage, yeah. Thank you. Let's move on, please. Next slide, yeah. So, Dr. Zera tried to talk about the social protection intervention in Ethiopia, especially the PSMP. It has been now for almost 2 decades now. So Ethiopia has got really almost 2 decades experience on this intervention. So it has been from PSMP 1 up to 5 now. So it's really a long time. They built their own experience now, and delivering they expanded to UPSMP, urban PSMP. They moved from rural areas to the urban as well because there are many poor people who are living in urban areas. Usually they are really disregarded or no one really supporting them. So they brought this kind of intervention now to expand, reaching more of rural as well as the urban areas. And so in our studies, one of the missing links we found was really in terms of linking the intervention from the local to the global level, especially in Ethiopia. We tried to see, we couldn't really find, sometimes we struggled to find the links between the household impact, community level impact, and regional level as well as the federal level or state level intervention. So this is really a missing link where the government needs to really work on it. So based upon our studies, we try to develop this nexus approach to the intervention. So especially this approach is developed based upon our research that focus on pastoralism, resilience, and social protection, PRSP. So with this intervention, we try to bring a number of factors together and try to create some kind of synergies to enhance the impact of this intervention on pastoral communities. So we can break down this nexus into the 4 components it has got. So especially the actors, institutions, and policy design. I can really highlight only the role of the local authorities. Usually they are really bypassed by the federal and regional governments. They are not considered as if really the key actors in this whole system. So that's really one of the challenges we spotted. In terms of affordability, it's not really easy program. Honestly, it's multi-billion program. So how African countries or governments can have this kind of funding, especially by generating their own domestic revenue system, it's a challenge. So it's usually supported by World Bank, USAID, DFID at that time. So, and also these kind of things have been really flowing, but once this kind of intervention stopped from global partners, what will happen to these programs? Especially in one of the South African countries, there was an intervention, but when they asked the donor to scale up, they said we don't have fund for scaling up. So they stuck there. They had to look for other sources. So when it's designed and implemented and also try to expand it or scale up, it should be looked from the affordability of this intervention in these countries. In terms of performance of the program, there is also a clash between cost-benefit analysis and also real bringing some kind of service to the communities, especially if you consider it as a kind of the human rights approach. So they tend to really clash between these two elements. The result-based focus should be really be emphasized nowadays, especially in terms of delivering aid or food support to the communities. At the same time, getting the results be measured, but it's really difficult sometimes to quantify the impact. Especially from what I have tried to study, the measurement of the impact should really focus on the household. I don't know how to do it, but really to see whether this kind of impact has brought some kind of tangible livelihoods to the communities or not to the household, you know. So I believe it's really important to look at each household and it's to measure its impact. The last one is the technological advancement. We are very familiar with this one. Ethiopia has got now the telebirr. If you go to Kenya, Tanzania, and other countries, Egypt itself, there is M-Pesa. It's very common way of sending money and receiving money. So Ethiopia has got this telebirr being introduced, and the PSMP is using this technological advancement of sending money. It's really very important. So maybe this can really reduce the hurdles of bureaucracy, maybe can promote efficiency, but time will decide about, we'll talk about this one later stage. Ethiopia has introduced the digital identity card, called FIDA. So this can also maybe link it to this safety net program, maybe how it can really impact. We can also see, but as early stage. So let's move to the final. Yes, thank you. Only 1 minute. Yeah. Okay, so to move into these final slides. So it's the positive contribution of this program. It increases the coping mechanism. It increases food consumption of the consumption of the household in terms of food, but it misses to really reach the nutritional value of the children, because most of the time the food is the same. So this really kind of criticism for this program. It focuses on food security rather than the whole resilience of the household. That's another critical point to mention. Another one is just to miss looking at the productivity of the household, especially when we went to these Afar communities. We found like the same family stayed in this program for 10 years. If someone is staying in the same program for 10 years, especially while able to work, so there should be a question to ask. So the next steps for this program is just, like I mentioned earlier, the digital service I do expect to play a role in financial inclusion, and the ownership of the programs, whether state homegrown programs or imposed programs from the donors. There will be more of consolidation of the program and the focus on long-term impacts. And also, we believe that these programs move on to seek alternative income generation activities or programs. And finally, there should be a means for regional knowledge sharing mechanism. As to the last point, last slide. Thank you, Mr. The last slide, I just want to highlight on the book, the importance of the book. The book is very important, really. It covers a lot of issues from the use, the intervention by Southern Ethiopia. It also looks at what this contribution could be to other sub-Saharan Africas. And it's the good thing with this book is just 94% of the authors were from the region. So we really try to get the experts from the region. It's not really from somewhere, they don't really know the region, so it's very important. The knowledge co-creation was very important as well. We try to involve communities, scholars, policymakers from that region. My final point on the decolonization of knowledge, which is very critical for me. The book, the price of the book is £130 online, the hard copy. £130. Who is going to afford this book now? So all the knowledge generated from that region, all the experts participate from that region, most of them. But now it's 130. I mean, there should be something to be done for the publishers, honestly. If not, who is going to access these policymakers? So that's really my final note, but luckily this paperback, we got this one negotiated and we got this one with about 18 or 20 pounds. So this really fair price still, but for Africans still expensive. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Sorry, what I have to do because we have to vacate this place by 7. So that is the challenge. If we had time, then we could have really continued the discussion. So thank you very much. Well, now to Angela, please.
Okay. Can I stand up so you can
Yeah.
see me? Okay. Also, my knees are giving up. Thank you very much. I was very honored to be asked to join the group when they were writing this book. You may ask, who am I and why me? I have done work for over 30 years within the Horn of Africa on emergency preparedness and in the humanitarian sector. And I've worked many years in Ethiopia, specifically with Afar communities. So Ma'aseni for those of you who online, who may be listening in Samara. Anyway, I was very honored. And because the book, we were writing it in the middle of COVID, it was felt that it would be a good idea to try and insert a chapter on the impact of COVID, because that was what was going on in the globe at large. And so what I'm going to talk about, and they were asking me as someone who's been in the humanitarian field, what would be the issues around the COVID situation. So next slide, please. Okay. Let's just remind ourselves what was going on then. I call it the Great Pause because it was allegedly one of the greatest shocks since World War II, an unprecedented event shared by millions in different ways across the globe. It had an adverse impact both in the north and the south, sector-wide. It hit education, health, psychology, you name it, everything and everybody was affected. And it was compounded in many regions that were already undergoing various kinds of financial crises, disasters, conflict, and all of this was sort of exaggerated and exacerbated by it. There was a deep concern felt by 4 regions that had weak public institutions and financial protection, as Dr. Barakat was saying, you know, how they were going to cope. And this was, as I said, global. It also reignited huge debates on social protection systems across the globe, i.e., what is the role of government for its citizens, and how are we prepared, and what kind of protection can we offer, and all of these debates were sort of going on. And can social protection respond to new contingencies? And what are these new contingencies? We're very used to old risks, but now the pandemic reminded us that there are new risks coming out from all corners, including an asteroid. Apparently on its way, so look out. Anyway, it also, in the social protection world, it also ignited debates about is social protection just a kind of technical thing where you help with welfare, or can it be transformative? Can it be more political? Can it really help changes at community level in terms of the way resilience and development happens that can protect and mitigate also against shocks? So all of these was going on. It was also a time of huge reflection on everything, existential. Who are we? Why are we here? What's going on? What kind of world have we created? Why is this happening? Etc., etc. Alas, we seem to have forgotten that great pause, and we're carrying on back to business as usual. But the idea was also to think about futures. What is the future of countries, but most importantly, of our planet? And how are these new issues going to affect us? And most important also, a time to think about new development paradigms and new ways of doing humanitarian human rights work. Thank you. Next one. I only have two more. Hang in there. So what was the impact in Ethiopia? Of course, during this period, it was also very difficult to get research to know what was going on during COVID, because when we're all immobilized, unless we had social media, etc., it was very difficult to know the exact impact during that time. I think now there has been research looking backwards, so for those of you who want to know about the impact, you can see research that's looking backward. But at that time, we were trying to get as much information as possible. But the response of the government was very quick. It has a disaster management system. It has a mechanism. It's very experienced, or was very experienced, in putting together a program. So under the Deputy Prime Minister, a coordination system was set up, and the protocols, as encouraged by WHO, began to be put in place for Ethiopia: travel restrictions, quarantine, safety, washing, the whole thing that countries around the world were trying was put into place. An important thing was Ethiopian Airlines diverted a lot of its cargo, kept flying, and actually began to fly in very needed medicine for the rest of Africa. So this, if you don't know about this, it was a very important issue. But as the economic impact of the slowing down of the economy, the closing of markets, the restrictions on movement began to take effect, everything else began to suffer. Education, high dropouts, inability to sustain livelihood. So all of these affected the country very dramatically. In the pastoralist areas, there was already an ongoing drought. The humanitarian caseload, by the time COVID broke out, was already around 20 to 22 million. And then they were also exacerbated by conflict in various parts of the country, and then the big unfortunate conflict with the north. And there were a lot of other issues by drought, flood, locusts, also governance issues. There was a time of political transition. There was a time, and during the transition, it also affects basic services, high turnover of staff. So all of these things were compounding a global planetary situation. One of the things that was happening for pastoralists, for example, in the Borana area, the government changed the currency, and a lot of people who had a lot of old currency, who kept it at home, were taking it to market, and then found that actually this is no good, okay, and nobody had told them in advance. So this kind of issue exacerbated the situation. The closure of you saw the lovely picture of all the flocks going off to Barbara. Well, you can see what happens when you're not allowed to move, and the mobility, the livelihood system, which depends on mobility, in times was being threatened. But at the same time, there were a lot of, because a lot of these communities were actually in, as it were, periphery, faraway areas, they didn't actually get exposed to COVID. So there was downsides and upsides. So what did we learn, and what are we still learning from a kind of situation like COVID and its implications on the current global situation, and especially for Sahel and pastoralist communities? The whole big issue of looking at old risks with new risks. And what are these new risks? And I think we have to understand now that it's a sort of global, the local is increasingly affected by the global, and the global is changing very fast. And beyond the sort of global politics, there's the planetary issue of the impact of climate change, which I think sits over us, all of us, in a very, very kind of big way, and has a lot of implications for the future. So how do we understand these layers of, in order to understand the different layers, the what the business now calls multi-hazard, multi-shocks, and how does climate change, as well as emerging global issues, there are political issues of new regional blocks, new power blocks, not just state, but non-state entities teaming up with huge corporations that are bigger than countries. What are the impacts of all of these issues, and how do we prepare for some of the downside of their effect on national and then at local community level? What are the kinds of systems and communication that is going to be needed for preparedness? Because at the end of the day, the big issue was how do we prepare to response, and what is the appropriate kind of response, and particularly what is the appropriate kind of response for communities like pastoralists who depend on mobility for their livelihood system, and for livestock, because it is their health and well-being is in the one health, one economy. It's all together. The health of their animals as well as the health of the community itself is very important. And so what are these systems that are needed to be put in place? And also what are the principles that politically have to be put in place? In that at country level, that the citizens of all kinds have a right for systems, for early warning systems, for protection, and governments and regional bodies have an obligation to put in these systems. And so more and more we are being challenged to know what these appropriate systems are going to be. How do we recalibrate aid practices? We also learned, as we're learning in Syria and Afghanistan and these huge emergencies across the globe, the way in which social protection, whether an aid, emergency aid is being delivered, whether it's cash or kind or food, how it is accountable, how it actually reaches who needs it, how aid is targeted in an accountable way, is also now being rethought, and we need to think about it, because our lessons have been that very often there's been a lot of wastage, corruption, etc. So there's a great moment of rethinking, and a lot of what, especially the social protection research here has highlighted that. And above all, how does development itself build in resilience? And what is resilience? Build back to better? What was better? Back to what? I mean, all these questions need to be asked. Last slide. Okay, lessons learned. The for Sahel, African Union has endorsed a multi-hazard early warning and action system, and hopefully this is something that all the countries, including Ethiopia, will eventually put in place, and to make sure that every country has a system that is based on various principles and is working so that communities do not get left out. And it's based on a comprehensive risk management system, a good dissemination and communication system, and has preparedness and response. And above all, is trusted, that communities from high up to trust that the government will do something, and the government hopefully trusts its communities to have the right kind of information. And this hopefully also resonates with the African Union framework for pastoralists in Africa, which, as you have heard today, the rights of pastoralists is very important. And so their rights to protection and recognizing their value and contributions and developing appropriate specific policies protecting livelihood security, access to rangelands, and ensuring participation. And above all of these are political issues. They're not technical issues. They're very, very political because it requires a political decision to recognize the viability of pastoralism. There are 4 V's we need to learn. Viability of pastoralism. Pastoralism is also often vulnerable, and it is varied. It's not all the same in different countries. And above all, it is very valuable, varied, viable, vulnerable. And that's it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Angela, for finishing on time. Well, I think, I hope the professor is online, and I hope he's listening.
Got any slides? I'm just thought I'd smile at you rather than just being a hidden voice. Okay.
Yeah, but unfortunately, technically, we have a problem, so.
That's
and
all right.
we are also under stress in time because we have to finish within the next 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, this is a very important book. I'm particularly excited that it's actually authored by 17 specialists, most of whom are either from the region or have worked extensively at the sharp end within the region, like Angela, who's just spoken to us. I have listened to everything that's gone before. I'm excited by the vision of this project to roll out the particular study in Afar to a wider canvas and right across sub-Saharan Africa. That is very important. The interest in how to support the chronically poor is increasing around the world, and particularly in Africa. The sustainability of it all is the big question. And the book touches on this quite clearly, leads up to this. The problem is when governments intervene in a big way, such as the PSNP, when they withdraw or when the project comes to an end, what then? I often define sustainability as for the grandchildren. We want something that the grandchildren can engage with. We need that long-term vision. So I would be most interested to see a follow-on research project about the mutual assistance, which is touched on in this study and which is familiar particularly to Professor Frey in his work on indigenous technical knowledge. But the supplying of lactating cows by communities to those who are in the most chronic need, and the various other ways in which people support each other. I think research on that, its extent, its type, and how to supplement it rather than supplant it. Because the danger is, I've noticed in various parts of the world, when government schemes come along and give a lot of money, then people sit back and say, okay, the government are now doing it for us. And those indigenous systems go into abeyance, and getting them resurrected again is a critical challenge. So also, I think within our training, there needs to be more emphasis on better resource management and teaching on entrepreneurship. There are very good examples in the Horn of Africa. I'm thinking of the rise in small-scale dairying in Kenya at the moment. There are many other examples. So I think that side has to be stressed alongside group extension for mutual learning, where the group work that is going on in a number of these communities is consciously catalyzed and encouraged, because from that mutual learning can come trust, and then you can begin to talk at a regional or a national level about public-private community partnerships and the whole concept of social enterprise, community interest companies and so forth. Very, very important in development, and I think increasingly so. So I commend this book. I agree with what Bereket said about the pricing. There needs to be a means of making its work available cost effectively to those who will apply it. And there are many other things I could say, but Mr. Chairman, you are constrained for time. I hope that the panel may comment on some of those points I've raised. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for understanding our concentration and then making your intervention short. Well, we have 8 minutes. Well, I will open the floor for comments now.
Yeah, we can see you now.
Yeah. Well, we can see him now. Well,
Too bad.
it's done. Well, any question, comments? And there are people online. If there are some of the researchers might be also on the other end. If they have joined or if they have any comment, they can also come in. Comment, question? Yes, sir.
Hi there, Ruben speaking. It's just to pick up on a theme that came up a few times, particularly in the recent presentation. I wonder if you could speak a bit more about the kind of political context of this, particularly about whether you feel that pastoralists have a kind of effective voice within kind of political institutions in the Horn of Africa, and particularly whether there is a kind of growing consensus around this social protection, or if it is kind of quite a divisive political issue.
Thank you. Well, the voices. So, well, this is also the voice now. Well, any more question or comments? Yes, sir.
I had a question for Bereket, and it seems to me it's kind of the heart of some of the issues. Is you mentioned a conflict between, and I didn't write down accurately the words, but I think it was between the short-term social protection element of the cash transfers, I think, and delivering services, presumably in the sense of long-term. And it came up again, I think, Angela, when you were talking between a conflict between long and short term. And I wondered if you could just speak a little bit more about that, because you were quite enigmatic when you mentioned it. And it seems to me that that's one of the key conflicts or tensions within social protection programs.
Thank you. Well, just one more question, and then I would give the chance for the. Yes.
At what level do you feel that interventions are most effective? Regional, local? What level do you feel that interventions are most effective?
Okay. Well, thanks. So, there is one question for you, Bereket, and then Angela, and then Zuri can also chip in on the last question and the rest. Well, you have 2 minutes each.
Okay.
Because we have only 5 minutes,
Okay.
and we have to give them an opportunity to buy the books.
So thanks a lot for the questions. It's very critical in terms of measuring the impact of the program, especially because the idea is just to move on from this ad hoc intervention of drought and also disasters to having a very systematic way of delivering the services. So the key difference between these two, or the clash, what I said, is just to, if you are looking at the immediate impact, that you cannot really look the long-term impact. But if you are trying to design a program which can consider the long-term impact, you can have this short-term impact where you can have some components, but you need to really keep in your mind that how this can really contribute towards the long-term objectives of the program, especially towards the building the national economy and global development goals. So I can see there is a missing link between these two critical factors. That's why I was trying to really emphasize on how this can be reconciled, because sometimes politicians tend to really intervene quickly for a specific objective, and that remains there. So this shouldn't be like that. It should be really linked properly to attain to bring the proper impact on the communities. Thank you.
Angela, also are on the same issue.
Yeah, I think he said it all. I think the key issue is this a kind of a propaganda, the government, any government saying we're doing something good, immediate, here we are giving, as it were, relief, quick cash, quick food, or is it something which is designed to be really transformative, where communities decide for themselves, and whether the long-term aim is to change the conditions and to question some of the conditions that has created the vulnerability in the first place.
Thanks. Well, Zuri, now you can also address his question and her question there, and then we can really wind it up.
I forgot your question, sorry.
Well,
It's about the political context.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Yeah, I think I would say, frankly, our region is not only food deficit, but security is a problem. I think we keep dodging it, and we keep because we want to work in this country. I think the truth is our region is unstable. Whether it's for nomads, whether for urban people, there's a big problem, unresolved issues still lingering. And I would say, unless that's sorted out, the cohesion between these countries and issues are resolved, which comes to be, this is, to me, the fundamental issue if we're going to progress in our countries, number one. Number two is, as she was saying earlier over there, I think, as I said, if you look at the ecological setting of the region, the challenges are similar. And I think if you've got stable governments, stable NGOs, social movements, then you can neutralize some of this conflict. That's very important to me. I think the rest is okay. But this is my nightmare. And the region is at war with itself in many ways. And I think we need to sort that out. Unless we do that, nothing is going to happen. That's the truth, to me at least, when I think about it deeply. Sorry. Okay.
Oh, okay, well, thanks a lot. So, John, you have something to say?
Just two quick ones. I wanted to respond to Ruben's question about, do pastoralists have a voice? One of the important voices they have is Penha, one of the co-sponsors tonight, nearly 35 years old. Support Penha, very important. And then the young lady who asked at what level do interventions work, my experience would be at community level. But there is a caveat to that. And we think back to the late President Julius Nyerere with his Ujamaa project in Tanzania, where he tried to keep every village the same. And he didn't want a big intervention here and nothing there in order to stir up local conflict. That's a sensitive issue, and all the cultural caveats that go with that. But community level and encouraging communities to set up their own social enterprises is the way to make social protection sustainable, I believe.
Well, thank you very much for that. Well, I think Well, that is part of the indigenous system too. Well, there are quite a lot of excellent coping mechanisms which we have to really foster and then promote them. And then, of course, I'm not saying that we should really work in isolation of the rest of the global community, but I think we have to really give due emphasis to the indigenous system, and then dealing with the grassroots people, with the people at the ground, people who are, well, as I've said, all of them have said that, well, have not been heard, or they were not able to share their concerns, has really been the challenge in most development work. Well, we have always been talking about bottom up, but it has remained top down. So most probably that tradition, that culture will come to an end soon. Well, with that, I can see that the family of our late brother, Case Maxi, are here, and we have also the family of Nicole here, and we have at the beginning of the session, we have said that, well, we really appreciate the contribution of all the two of you in the 30 years of PENA. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And sorry to rush it, but I think we have to really finish it on time. And then thank you, the panelists, and thank you who have joined us online. So thank you very much. And now the book is available. It is only £20. And where is Kuba? Okay, there at the back.
The same, no?
Yeah, because it is an excellent advocacy book. Well, it's an excellent reference book, which we should really have it and then read it. Thank you very much.
Can I have that? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.